My name is Athena Williams, 38 years old, and a single morning phone call turned my whole world upside down. The wedding planner for my brother-in-law called, her voice calm. Your husband said you won't be attending the wedding anymore, but the $40,000 you already paid will stay. I paid the money, yet my name was erased from the very celebration I had quietly built. After 15 years of building Aurora Hospitality, a hotel and event empire spread across 5 states, I suddenly realized I was nothing more than a walking wallet in their eyes. Have you ever been dismissed and exploited by the very people who should value you most? Share with me in the comments, hit like and subscribe to the channel to support more stories about women's strength when pushed to the limit. And now let's continue my story. I once started from a small cafe on the corner of a street in Flagstaff, Arizona. In those early days, I brewed coffee, wiped tables, and jotted down expansion ideas in a worn notebook. I dreamed that one day I could build a place that didn't only sell drinks, but also hosted events where people felt cherished and memories were preserved. From that dream, Aurora Hospitality was born. But to my husband's family, what I did was never recognized. At every gathering, they introduced me casually. This is Athena, Mark's wife. She helps a little with events. Each time I heard it, I still smiled and kept quiet, thinking that time would prove everything. In 15 years of marriage, I quietly played a role no one wanted to mention but everyone benefited from. My brother-in-law Daniel studied architecture in California. When he didn't have enough money for his final year's tuition, I wrote a check and handed it to Mark to give him. Say it's from Mom and Dad, I told him, not wanting Daniel to feel guilty. He graduated, got a stable job, but never once mentioned that money again. My in-laws Henry and Margaret once lived in an old wooden house on the outskirts of Phoenix. The roof tiles were cracked, sweltering in summer, freezing in winter. I quietly bought them a new home with a backyard filled with fragrant orange trees, simply because family should live comfortably. When they moved in, neighbors praised, friends admired, but in every story, credit always went to Mark, as if he had taken care of it all. Another time, my niece, the daughter of my sister-in-law Laura, won a partial scholarship to study in England, but the family couldn't cover the rest. I quietly shifted company funds and paid it all. At the airport send-off, everyone was moved to tears. Laura squeezed Mark's hand. You're amazing, making sure she can study abroad. I stood beside them, clutching my niece's suitcase, silent about the transfer I had just signed. Mark, my husband, rarely objected when I spent money, but he also never acknowledged that it was mine. He let his family believe he carried the load. Maybe deep down he thought that was a wife's role, to step back so the husband could shine. At every family dinner, I was the one who prepared the feast, the good wine, the flowers. When guests complimented, my mother-in-law said, Mark is so thoughtful, taking care of every detail. I stayed quiet, cleaning in the kitchen, listening to the laughter echo from the living room. Once I tried to resist. At a Christmas dinner 5 years ago, when everyone praised the new house, I gently said, actually but Mark cut me off right away. Athena only helped with some paperwork. Mostly it was Mom, Dad, and me. I looked at him, words caught in my throat. The table erupted in laughter, no one noticing that I had just been erased from something I had done. I began to wonder, had my silence taught them to undervalue me? Had my generosity convinced them I didn't need recognition? Aurora Hospitality grew every day. From that small cafe, I bought an old hotel and renovated it into a dream wedding venue. Then came a resort in Sedona, a chain of restaurants in Santa Fe, a convention center in Las Vegas. By the 10th year, Aurora was present in 5 states, with revenue surpassing veteran corporations. But at home, I was still only the wife who helps a little. I remember one night in Las Vegas when I signed a contract with a major real estate group. That same night, local newspapers ran the headline, Aurora Hospitality, female CEO expands the Southwest event empire. I called home excited to share. Mark answered flatly, don't let work consume you. You remember tomorrow's my mom's birthday party, right? Not a single word of congratulations. At home, when guests came, Mark still introduced me. This is Athena, my wife. She likes party planning, so she helps a little. Oh. Those 2 words cut deeper than any insult. Yet I kept giving. Maybe because I believed kindness would eventually be seen. Maybe because I feared that if I stopped, I would lose my place in that family. One afternoon, Daniel came to me, his voice uneasy. Athena, Emily and I want to get married, but the costs are too high. Could you and Mark lend us some money, or use your connections to get a discount? I looked at his worried face, remembering when he was just a trembling student. I nodded. Don't worry. We'll take care of it. You just focus on loving Emily well. That night, I transferred $40,000, the equivalent of 2 days of profit from Aurora Hospitality. I only told Daniel, let everyone think we both arranged it. Don't mention me. Daniel hugged me, whispering, you're the blessing of this family. I believed that. Believed it so much that when the wedding planner called this morning, I almost couldn't believe my ears. I paid the money, yet I was erased from the very celebration I had built. I sat in my 38th floor office, looking down at Phoenix's crowded streets. The entire city knew Aurora Hospitality, knew Athena Williams. But in my own home, among those who called me family, I was only a shadow, used when needed, discarded when not. And maybe it was all those years of silence that emboldened them to do something this cruel. From a little cafe on the corner in Flagstaff, Arizona, I had turned a dream into Aurora Hospitality, an ecosystem of hotels, restaurants, and event venues across 5 states. Mornings opening with the smell of fresh beans, nights closing with numbers written in a frayed notebook, then the first deals. Buying an old hotel, transforming it into a place where people touched beautiful memories. Every brick, every chandelier was years of patient effort. But at every in-law dinner I was still introduced carelessly. Athena, she helps a little with events. I smiled and stayed silent, thinking one day results would speak for themselves. For 15 years I quietly paid Daniel's last year tuition, bought my in-laws a new house to escape suffocating summers and freezing winters, and covered my niece's remaining tuition so she wouldn't miss her chance abroad. All done in silence. When someone gave praise, credit went elsewhere, and I retreated to the kitchen, changing flowers, washing glasses, setting tables. Once at Christmas I tried to say the house was my doing. Mark cut in smoothly, she only helped with paperwork. A light remark, but enough to erase the person who made the transfer. I sat down, listening to laughter in the living room, asking myself, had my kindness without asking for recognition taught them to dismiss me? Aurora grew. A resort in Sedona, a convention center in Las Vegas, a restaurant chain in Santa Fe. Local newspapers once called me the female CEO of the Southwest. I called home, thrilled to share. On the other end, I only heard, don't forget tomorrow's mom's birthday. Not a single congratulation. I hung up, signed another contract, and returned to the rhythm where I was both the strategist and the invisible shadow in my family. I kept giving. Partly because I believed kindness would be noticed, partly because I feared losing my place if I stopped. Until Daniel admitted the wedding was too expensive, and I transferred $40,000, telling him, let everyone think the family handled it. He hugged me, called me the blessing of the family. I believed it until this morning, when the call came from the wedding planner, telling me I had been cut out of the very wedding my money secured. The glass tower under Phoenix's sun reflected a woman who had carried everything without ever appearing in the picture. The city knew Aurora Hospitality belonged to me, but at home I was still seen as someone who contributed a little. They boldly pushed me out of the frame, keeping only what they wanted, my money. And in that moment of realization, one question rang clear, like noon sunlight striking the glass walls of my office. Was my silence still kindness, or had it become the excuse they used to trample over my boundaries? My in-laws' kitchen that evening glowed under the yellow lights. On the long wooden table, roasted meat sent up steaming ribbons. A bowl of salad sat beside a vase of roses freshly cut from the garden. At first glance everything looked warm and cozy, but the air carried an unspoken tension I couldn't name. Daniel, my brother-in-law, drew a deep breath and set his glass down, his eyes bright with both joy and worry. I have something to share with the family, he began, glancing at Emily, the blonde woman beside him. Their hands were clasped, eyes sparkling. We're engaged. For a moment the table erupted. My mother-in-law gasped, tears welling up. Mark, my husband, smiled and pulled his brother close. Congratulations, Dan. It's about time. I smiled too, clapping softly. Emily blushed, lowering her head. Their happiness was clear, but then, like a cloud drifting in, the sighs began. But I don't know if we can afford a proper wedding, Daniel admitted, his voice dropping. My job is steady but not enough. Emily is still paying off student loans. Our savings are only about $5,000. Emily gripped his hand tighter, adding, we don't want it to be just a courthouse signing. But with so little, it feels impossible. My mother-in-law dabbed her eyes. Sweetheart, you deserve more than a courthouse paper signing. Then she turned to my husband, her voice trembling. Mark, what can we do? Your brother can't let people think he can't provide for his wife. Mark sighed, giving me a sidelong glance, a silent signal I knew too well. That look always meant he expected me to fix it, though he never said it aloud. He let others believe he was the one carrying the load. The table buzzed with ideas. Maybe rent a community hall, use folding chairs, put up paper flowers. A small backyard gathering would do as long as family's there. Or save up, wait a few more years? I listened quietly, my heart heavy. I knew those solutions wouldn't bring true joy. A wedding isn't just a party, it's a memory for life. Emily's head bowed, her shoulders shaking. Daniel stroked her back, but shame flickered in his eyes too. They truly loved each other, of that I was certain. But even the most beautiful love deserves a worthy beginning. I inhaled, feeling the tension pressing down on the room. Every face at the table seemed to wait for a miracle, but no one dared to ask outright. Mark stayed silent, occasionally glancing at me. At last I stood and smiled softly. Daniel, Emily, I said calmly, give me some time. I might know how to help. All eyes turned to me. That night, after the guests left, I sat in the kitchen under the yellow glow, the tablecloth stained with wine. Emily lingered, her eyes red. Mrs. Thina, I'm sorry for putting you on the spot. We don't expect much, we just want one decent day. I took her hand, squeezing gently. You deserve that day, Emily. Don't blame yourself. I opened my bag and pulled out my checkbook. Swiftly, I wrote the number, $40,000. I tore the check out and placed it in her hand. Emily's eyes widened, her voice catching. No, this is too much, we can't. I pressed my finger lightly to her lips and shook my head. Only one condition, keep it secret. Don't tell anyone, not even Mark. He doesn't need to know. And most of all, you and Daniel mustn't feel burdened. Think of it as a gift for the start of your life together. Emily broke down, hugging me tightly. I don't know what to say except thank you. You really are the blessing of this family. I stayed silent, stroking her hair. Inside, I felt something sweet and bitter at once. Sweet because I could bring joy. Bitter because I knew tomorrow no one would mention my name. When I returned to the living room, Mark was still watching TV, his empty beer glass on the table. He looked up. What did you say to Emily? I told them not to worry too much. He shrugged, turning back to the screen. I said nothing more. I walked into my office and shut the door. On the desk, contracts for Aurora, million-dollar deals, lay waiting for my signature. In the drawer, I had just slipped the checkbook, still smelling faintly of fresh ink. I told myself they'll never know. And maybe that's the best way to keep peace. But I never imagined that very silence would pave the way for a deeper wound. The first call came on a Monday morning while I was in a meeting with my executive team on the 38th floor. The voice from Sunset Ridge Estate wavered, uncertain. I'm sorry, Mrs. Williams. We just received notice from your husband. He asked us to remove your name from all documents related to Daniel and Emily's wedding. But he emphasized that the $40,000 deposit remains. I wanted to confirm directly with you. Excuse me, did you say, remove my name? There was hesitation on the line. Yes, Mr. Mark Morrison said you won't be involved anymore. But the full costs remain unchanged. In the conference room, colleagues were still debating a new deal in Nevada. I switched to speakerphone, stepped toward the glass wall overlooking Phoenix. The sound of traffic below rang in my ears like a harsh symphony. Thank you for calling me. I'll handle this, I replied, keeping the steady tone I had honed in 15 years of business. Before I could hang up, a message flashed on my screen. Stop being dramatic. It was a gift. You're not coming, deal with it. I read Mark's cold words again and again. Sharp as knives. Stop being dramatic. You're not attending. Accept it. My heart pounded, but outwardly I stayed composed. I was used to shocks, to tense negotiations, but never had I imagined my husband would turn my love and generosity into a nameless gift, and then strip me of my presence. Just hours later, the phone rang again. This time it was Copper Canyon Catering. The manager, a young woman, spoke cautiously. Mrs. Williams were a bit confused. Yesterday, Mr. Mark called, saying from now on all communication should go through Emily, his sister-in-law. He also repeated that you're no longer involved with the wedding, but the sponsorship stays the same. Honestly, we've never encountered something like this. Could you confirm? I closed my eyes, breathing deep. Emily. So they had already lined up someone to replace me. Thank you for being direct, I said. Let me review this. I'll respond soon. After the second call, I knew this wasn't a mistake. This was a planned move. When I returned to the table, my assistant handed me another message from Mark. Vendors are confused. Please stop interfering. Let me and Emily handle it. You're only making things messy. I, who had signed hundreds of million-dollar contracts, who managed a network spanning 5 states, was now being painted by my husband as emotional baggage, a nuisance in the eyes of vendors I had known for years. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in my home office, the desk lamp casting yellow light over stacked contracts. Numbers and revenue reports gleamed, proof of a lifetime's effort, while Mark's message glared on my phone like an open wound. Around 10 o'clock my mother-in-law called. Her voice was soft, but each word carried that familiar manipulation. Athena, don't make this dramatic. Daniel and Emily only want a peaceful day. Mark says you're very stressed from work. Maybe you should rest and let others handle it. I was erased from the very wedding I'm funding. Do you think that's normal? She paused for a second, then sighed. In a family, sometimes we need to compromise. Daniel's happiness matters most. Don't make a big deal out of it. I closed my eyes and let the phone fall onto the table. The next day, I got another call from Desert Palm Resort, the hotel owned by Aurora Hospitality itself. The manager sounded so unsure that I could hear the tremor in his voice. Ma'am, Mark told us to switch all contact information over to MS. Emily. But when we checked the system, we saw that the investor on record is you. Honestly, we don't know whom to follow. I stifled a dry laugh. Mark truly had no idea what he was messing with. That afternoon, Emily suddenly sent me a message. Athena, I know you're busy. I want to thank you for the generous gift. But to keep things simple, you don't need to be present at the wedding. It will be easier for everyone. I read it, my hands trembling. The first tears fell onto my desk. Not because I regretted the money, but because of the blatant betrayal. They accepted the gift, then agreed together to erase me as if I were a blot of ink to be wiped away so the family picture would look prettier. That evening when Mark came home, I waited in the kitchen. He tossed his keys on the table, his voice irritated. I hope you're happy. The vendors keep calling saying you're confusing them. Can you stop? Mark, I'm funding everything. I want to be present as a member of the family. Why are you pushing me out? He sneered, indifferent. You're always too sensitive. I did this to avoid drama. Don't you see that whenever you're there, the family gets tense? It's best if you stay out. I choked up. For the first time, all the years of endurance rushed back in a blink. From the house I bought for his parents to the tuition I paid for Daniel. All of it was turned into emotional baggage. My silence over the years had become their tool to legitimize exclusion. I wasn't just crossed off the guest list. My dignity was stripped away and I was turned into a story about the unstable woman they had to discreetly hide. The phone buzzed again, the last text from Mark that day. Daniel's wedding is not about you. Stop acting like it is. No, this wedding truly wasn't about me anymore. But the entire dream they held in their hands, every bouquet, every banquet table, every hotel room belonged to me. And this was the moment I began to understand. Betrayal isn't only pain. It's a reminder of where real power lies, and I had let them forget that for far too long. The next morning, I was in my Scottsdale office when my phone lit up with Margaret's name, my mother-in-law. I knew she wouldn't call unless she had a mission from the whole family. I picked up, her voice gentle and soothing enough to recall those backyard afternoon teas, yet each word soaked in manipulation. Athena, don't complicate things any further. This is Daniel's day. Let it pass. Let bygones be bygones. I stayed silent for a few seconds. The phrase was so familiar I could hear it in my sleep. Whenever injustice happened, Margaret used those exact 4 words to wipe away responsibility. I took a breath, keeping my voice steady. Mother, I want to ask. If you were erased from your son's wedding but still forced to pay the entire cost, could you consider that bygones? He paused, but only for a moment. Athena, every family has clashes. You're too sensitive. Don't ruin Daniel's happy day over a little pride. I wanted to laugh, but my throat tightened. In her eyes, betrayal and public humiliation were wrapped up in two words: pride. At noon, I had just left a meeting with the legal team when the phone rang again. This time it was Laura, my sister-in-law. Her voice carried open sarcasm. Sister Athena, I heard you're upset about the wedding. But you should be grateful, really. Thanks to your money, everything is taking shape. Even if you can't come, at least your contribution remains. I gripped the steering wheel as I drove, forcing myself to stay calm. Laura, did you just say I should be grateful for paying all the costs but not being allowed to appear? Laura let out a short laugh. Don't be so sensitive. What matters is Daniel and Emily's happiness. Helpers don't always need recognition. You're wealthy, you can cover it, that's enough. I listened as each word dropped into my ear like stones. The way she spoke made me feel less like a person and more like an ATM standing in the corner. Press a button, take the money, presents not required. That evening, I was about to turn off the office lights when a video call came from Emily, Daniel's fiancée. On the screen, her face appeared with a gentle smile, her voice so sweet it was hard to tell what was real. Athena, I just wanted to say you're wonderful for stepping back so gracefully. You're amazing for stepping back so gracefully. Daniel and I will never forget this sacrifice. I went rigid. Stepping back. I repeated, looking straight at the screen. Emily, I never agreed to step aside. Who told you that? Emily blinked, the smile still fixed in place. Mark told us you understood and agreed to let the family handle things. I truly admire your heart. Few people can set aside their ego for the greater good like you. Her honeyed words poured out, but I could smell the falseness. They had discussed this and aligned their story. Mark told the tale of my voluntary retreat, and Emily echoed it as if offering praise. I answered slowly, Emily, I gave you all that money so you and Daniel could have a complete day. But I never said I would stand aside, and I certainly never agreed to let someone else decide for me. Emily faltered for a moment, then quickly regained her gentle tone. I want you to know I'm grateful. As for everything else, maybe it's best not to make things tense. That line sealed the call like a wax stamp. We've agreed and you should stay silent. I sat in the dark room, city lights spilling through the window. The scattered pieces came together into a complete picture. From Margaret to Laura to Emily, they all repeated the same refrain. They weren't confused. They had a script, each with a role. The mother-in-law with let bygones be bygones, erasing all wrongdoing. The sister-in-law with the sneer that I should be grateful my money was useful. The future sister-in-law with a sweet voice, turning exclusion into a noble act I supposedly chose. I realized they had coordinated long before. In their eyes, I was nothing more than a walking bank. Memories flooded back. The house I bought for Henry and Margaret, the tuition I paid for Daniel, the study abroad I funded for my niece, the parties I quietly arranged. None of it meant anything now. They took, they spent, they enjoyed, and when they were done, they erased me like crossing a name off a guest list. I leaned back in my chair, my heart aching yet suddenly clear. For 15 years, I thought I was building kinship. In truth, I was feeding a habit. The habit of seeing me as the default payer, no thanks required, presents unnecessary. That night, I didn't sleep. I remained alone in my home office, the desk lamp casting light over thick stacks of documents. Financial reports, subsidiary charts, and merger agreements sprawled across the surface. My coffee had gone cold long ago, but I didn't care. I opened the corporate management system. With a few steps, the entire ownership map appeared before me. Sunset Ridge Estate, the villa venue for Daniel and Emily's wedding, was owned by Aurora Properties LLC. Copper Canyon Catering, the company handling the wedding banquet, had been acquired last year through a quiet merger. Desert Palm Resort, where all the guests had booked rooms, was the jewel of my hotel chain, operated directly by Aurora Hospitality. I leaned back and smiled faintly. They thought I was the sensitive wife, an aim on legs. But in truth, the entire wedding dream they clung to stood on the foundation I had built quietly for years. I picked up my phone and texted my operations assistant. Urgent. All contracts related to Daniel Morrison's wedding. Cancel immediately. Ensure strict compliance with the contract terms. Effective tomorrow morning. The other side replied after a few minutes. We understand, Mrs. Williams. We'll proceed overnight. I closed my eyes and drew a deep breath. This wasn't a rash move. This was a calculated counterattack. If they saw me as invisible, then it was time they realized I was the one holding all the cards. The next morning, just after sunrise, my phone rang non-stop. First was Daniel. His voice shook, rushed. Athena. What happened? I just got an email from Sunset Ridge saying the wedding is canceled. There's no venue anymore. Are you sure there isn't a mistake? No. They stated clearly. The contract was terminated under orders from the parent company. Athena, do you know anything about this? I let the silence stretch. Daniel grew more frantic. Not 10 minutes later, Emily called, her voice choked. The hotel canceled all the room bookings. They sent notices to every guest. Vina, how can this be? And the reception? Copper Canyon just messaged that all catering services are halted. I heard sobs on the other end. As for me, I quietly looked out the window, where Phoenix sunlight washed over the high-rises Aurora helped build. Around noon, Mark called. This time his voice wasn't calm, it carried anger and panic. What did you do? Don't tell me you're behind these contract cancellations. I set down my coffee cup and answered simply, you tell me, how could someone who only helps a little with events cancel everything in one night? The line went dead silent. I could picture his face going pale, eyes darting as he realized for the first time that what he'd always belittled was the real power he'd never touched. You can't do this. This is my brother's wedding. Mark growled, as if still clinging to a power that never belonged to him. You and your family chose to exclude me. I'm merely doing my part, pulling back support that was never respected. By afternoon the phone rang again. Margaret. Her voice trembled, so unlike her usual certainty. Athena, what do you mean by this? Daniel called me in tears. Every hotel, restaurant, venue, all gone overnight. Is this revenge? I answered slowly. Mother, how could I take revenge for something you told me to let bygones be bygones? If there's no place for me in that happy day, then there's no need for my money either. That's all. On the line, Margaret faltered, unable to find a rebuttal. By evening, the whole family was in chaos. Daniel texted nonstop, pleading, Sis, we were wrong. But please save the wedding. There's no venue available, no hotel will take us. Everything vanished in a day. I set my phone on the table, a strange calm settling over me. At last they understood what it felt like to be pushed out, the feeling I had swallowed for years. Over the next 2 days, news of the mass cancellations spread across Phoenix. Vendors in the industry whispered, Athena Williams made her move. They didn't know the details, but everyone understood. What Aurora held was a dense network, and when I gave the order, the whole system shifted at once. And my in-laws, those who had treated me like a walking bank, now realized that everything they dreamed of for that big day lay within my control. Late at night, I sat alone in the living room, lamplight falling across the ebony coffee table. My phone buzzed endlessly with messages from Mark, from Margaret, from Daniel. I let them be unanswered. I flipped through the wedding planning notebook Emily had once left in my in-laws' kitchen. Every line item, every vendor carefully noted. I looked at those numbers and exhaled softly. Everything had become zero. Real power wasn't in the money I spent, but in the fact that I could withdraw it at any time. The next morning my phone rang without stopping. From Phoenix to Las Vegas, the news spread fast. Every hotel, restaurant, and event provider was fully booked. I didn't need to call to know, because I was the one who gave the order. But hearing the panic from the other end still made me feel the weight of my choice. Daniel called again and again, his voice nearly breaking. Sis, I've called every hotel in the city, even in Las Vegas. Everyone says they're full. No one has availability for the wedding day. Athena, what am I supposed to do? I heard Emily sobbing in the background, Daniel trying to console her while he himself was unraveling. I kept my voice steady. Daniel, who do you think built that network? Who owns most of the hotels and restaurants you're calling? Silence. I didn't need to say more. That afternoon, Mark barged straight into my office. No knock, no appointment. His face was flushed, eyes blazing. You've gone too far, Athena. You're destroying Daniel's wedding because of petty spite. You're destroying my brother's wedding out of spite. I looked up from the file, my voice cold as steel. I'm not destroying anything. I'm showing you and your family that actions have consequences. Mark slammed his hand on the desk, papers scattering. Don't you get it? This is my brother's wedding. The whole family is counting on it. What you're doing will make everyone hate you. I walked slowly to the window and pointed to where Aurora Hospitality rose over the city center. Do you see that, Mark? Whose work is it? Who built this entire empire? In your family's eyes, I'm the one who helps a little. But the truth is everything they're clinging to, from hotel rooms to banquet tables, stands on the foundation I built. I saw his hand shaking, though he tried to keep his voice hard. Fine. If you want war, you'll get war. 2 days later, I summoned my personal attorney, Mr. Harrison, the man who had been with me since the earliest days. The meeting took place in the conference room on the 34th floor. Mark, Margaret, Daniel, and Emily were all there, faces haggard from lack of sleep. Margaret spoke first, her voice pleading. Athena, you can't let this go on. Daniel and Emily, they just want a peaceful wedding. Can you forgive, for the family? Forgive. When the whole family united to remove me but kept my money. Forgiveness doesn't mean letting people demean you, Margaret. Mark cut in, voice taut. You're dragging yourself down to the level of an enemy of your own family. All because of pride. I hadn't yet answered when Harrison slid a thick folder to the center of the table. He spoke slowly, each word clear. I'm sorry, but there's something more important than the wedding that must be addressed. Mrs. Williams, we've just completed a review of Aurora Hospitality's shareholdings. And we discovered a block of shares was transferred illegally. The room fell heavy. I felt my heart tighten. Harrison opened the folder. Pages crisp, bank seals glaring red. Mr. Mark Morrison used Mrs. Williams's name to transfer a portion of company stock into a personal account. The proceeds were withdrawn and moved into a high-risk investment fund. At present, that position is suffering heavy losses. Silence. I turned sharply to Mark. His face drained, stammering. I only meant to try investing. To increase the company's value. Athena, you misunderstood. Harrison cut him off, stern. Mr. Morrison, using company assets without the owner's consent is illegal. All the documents here prove it clearly. Daniel sat frozen while Emily covered her face, whispering, Oh God. So it turned out that while I was painstakingly building Aurora brick by brick, Mark had been quietly pulling out the foundation to satisfy his greed. Mark, you didn't just betray me in our family. You betrayed me in business. You took what belonged to me, hid it from me, deceived me, and then dared to say I was overreacting emotionally? He lowered his head, no longer arguing. Harrison continued, Mrs. Williams, we are ready to file suit if you wish. With this evidence, the court will not be on Mr. Morrison's side. Faces full of shock, shame, and fear. Margaret no longer had the strength to say anything. Daniel stared down and Emily quietly gripped her fiancé's hand. On the appointed day, I stood before the enormous glass wall of the conference room on the 40th floor, the top floor of Aurora Hospitality's headquarters. Below me, the panorama of Phoenix spread out, the morning sun reflecting off the gleaming towers. I hadn't chosen this place by accident. This was my domain, where contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars were signed, where there was no room for deceit or disrespect. When my in-laws walked in, the room's atmosphere dropped at once. Mark avoided my eyes, his face pale from sleepless nights. Margaret tried to maintain her composure, but her hands trembled as she set her bag on the chair. Daniel and Emily stuck close to each other, their eyes anxious. I signaled my assistant to close the door, then walked to the head of the long, glossy walnut table. On it were prepared folders, seals, and the large projector already displaying the words, Aurora Hospitality, Internal Investigation Results. I looked at each face, then began, Today we're not just talking about a wedding. We're going to talk about the truth. And I want everyone to listen carefully. I tapped the folder lightly. The assistant switched on the screen and page after page appeared. Not only was I deliberately crossed off Daniel's wedding while the $40,000 was kept, I had the company's entire cash flow reviewed. And here are the results. Mark Morrison, my husband, forged my signature to withdraw $500,000 from Aurora's internal investment fund. Breathing quickened around the room. Daniel snapped his head toward his brother, stunned. Mark, is this true? Emily raised a hand to her mouth, her face going white. Margaret went limp, dropping into a chair. I continued, my voice even, each word sharp as a blade. That money didn't disappear. It was transferred into a personal account and invested in a high-risk securities fund. Most of it is currently lost. All the evidence is here. Transfer slips, forged signatures, the bank's confirmations. I rotated the screen so everyone could see clearly. My signature had been clumsily mimicked, but still enough to pass on paper. Mark bristled. I only meant to double it. I thought it would help you help the company. Athena, you have to understand. I cut him off, my voice ice cold. Help me? Or help your ego? Since when does someone with no managerial role at Aurora have the right to forge the CEO's signature to take $500,000? The room went silent. I looked straight into each person's eyes. This is no longer a family matter. This is a crime. But I'll give you one last chance. A choice. I lowered my voice, no less sharp. If you want this wedding to proceed, the conditions are: first, $75,000 must be transferred immediately into Aurora's account to offset part of the losses. Second, Mark, Margaret, and Emily will write public apology letters, signed and sealed. Third, at the wedding, in front of all the guests, you will acknowledge that I was unjustly excluded, and that truth must be spoken aloud. Otherwise, the wedding will disappear completely. No vendor within a 2-state radius will take the job, no hotel will have rooms, and no banquet will be served. A chair scraped as Emily sprang to her feet. You can't force us to do that. This is my and Daniel's big day. Emily, if you truly want a big day, think carefully about who made it possible. It wasn't Mark and it wasn't Margaret. It was me. And the people you stood with made me invisible. Margaret's voice shook, a mix of anger and desperation. Athena, you're turning this family into a joke. I turned to her slowly. No, Mother. You and everyone else turned me into a joke for 15 years. Now it's time for the mirror to reflect the real image. Daniel, who had been silent, finally spoke, his voice tight. Sister Athena, if this is the only way, I'll do it. I don't want to lose Emily and I don't want to lose the family. But are you sure there's no other way? I looked straight at my brother-in-law, my gaze softening slightly. Daniel, I gave this family chances for years. But they always chose convenience and silence. This isn't cruelty, it's justice. Mark gripped the chair, trying to salvage something. You're going to ruin my brother's wedding just to prove I'm wrong? Athena, I'm your husband. I answered crisply, decisively. No, Mark. You ruined that wedding the moment you forged my signature and made me into a joke. I'm putting the truth on the table for everyone to see. The air in the room was so heavy it could be cut with a knife. Margaret bowed her head, whispering, We have to do it. Emily choked up but didn't object anymore. Daniel gave a weak nod. I gathered the files, my voice low but clear. You have 48 hours to transfer the money and complete the apology letters. If not, I will immediately file suit against Mark. And at that point there will be no wedding left to discuss. Outside the glass wall, the midday sun poured in, illuminating the stricken faces like stage lights, exposing their entire script of deceit. Aurora Canyon Resort that morning looked like a meticulously painted picture. The luxury retreat nestled among blazing red canyons under the Arizona sun. Rows of tables draped in pristine white, desert wildflowers arranged artfully in low crystal vases, elegant yet close to nature. I walked along the grand hall, my heels sounding a steady rhythm on the polished wooden floor. This place, like so many others, was part of the Aurora empire I had built. And now, I myself decided to allow this ceremony to take place, after my in-laws were forced to bow and accept the conditions. Guests arrived, their formal demeanor tinged with curiosity. I caught many sidelong glances. Clearly some had heard rumors about the recent turmoil. But I only smiled slightly and took my designated seat in the front row. No one could erase me from this scene anymore. Music rose. Daniel stepped out in a gray suit. Emily walked with her father, her simple white dress elegant. Her eyes dipped when she saw me, then quickly regained their smile. The proud defiance was gone, replaced by gratitude tinged with caution. After the opening rites, Daniel took the microphone. I saw his hand tremble slightly, but his voice was clear. Before we continue, I want to say this. Today we stand here under the sun in this beautiful resort. Not because of luck. Because of Athena. A murmur rippled through the room. Daniel paused, drew a breath, and went on. Without Athena, today wouldn't exist. And without her forgiveness, our family would have lost its honor. Emily and I admit before everyone that we treated her unfairly, even cruelly. We accepted her help, then deliberately pushed her aside. And that was our biggest mistake. Beside me, a few guests nodded. Others looked at me with surprise and respect. Emily stepped up, eyes wet. She lifted the mic, her voice tight. I want to apologize publicly. Athena, I know no words can erase the pain you endured. I stayed silent when I should have spoken up. I let myself be sheltered by your sacrifice while you were pushed out. Please forgive me, if not for me, then for Daniel. Meanwhile, Mark sat farther back. For the first time in our marriage, he was completely silent. No accusations, no harsh tone. His eyes averted, his shoulders slumped like a man stripped of power. Amid the light and flowers, he looked strangely small, a lost figure at a ceremony he once believed he controlled. Margaret bowed her head too, her aging face drawn tight. She said nothing, but the silence itself was an admission. Applause followed the speeches. Not the stiff, polite kind, but genuine approval for the truth spoken aloud. I sat there, calmly receiving it, needing neither nods nor smiles. Truth carried more weight than any justification. The ceremony continued, but the atmosphere had shifted. Everyone knew who held the foundation of this day. No one could deny it. And I, for the first time in years, was no longer the invisible shadow in the very family I had sustained. As Daniel and Emily exchanged rings, their eyes flicked toward me. There was gratitude, regret, and an acknowledgement that couldn't be denied. I remained silent, but deep inside I knew the balance had shifted forever. And Mark, he sat there motionless. His back curved, his eyes dull. The man who once loudly labeled me an emotional liability was now rendered powerless by the truth, no longer looked upon with respect, even by his own family. After the wedding, the spacious house where I had lived for 15 years suddenly felt suffocating. The white walls, the imported sofa that had once been Mark's pride, the mahogany dining table where we ate every day, now they were only mute witnesses to deceit and betrayal. I packed my things slowly, not out of reluctance, but to look closely and decide what I truly needed to take. One large suitcase, a few boxes of important files, some photos I cherished. That was all. The rest I left as is, like shedding a part of life I no longer wished to carry. My Tesla Model X was ready in the garage, its electric motor humming softly like a reminder. It was time to go. Mark appeared in the doorway, his hair disheveled, eyes shadowed from sleepless nights. He looked at me, his voice shaky yet still grasping at old authority. Athena, don't go. We can fix this. I know I was wrong. But we've had 15 years. Are you really throwing it all away? I set the last suitcase in the trunk and turned back. You're mistaken, Mark. I can fix businesses. I can turn around a failing company, sign deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But I can't fix a person who chooses betrayal. I fix businesses, not people who choose betrayal. He took a step closer as if to grab my hand, but I stepped back and closed the car door. For the first time I saw how small Mark was, not in stature but because he had no hold over me anymore. The Tesla rolled down the familiar road away from the old house. In the rearview mirror, Mark's frozen silhouette faded. 3 months later, Aurora Hospitality opened a new headquarters in Denver. The modern glass building reflected the Rockies standing majestic in the distance. Every morning as the sun tinted the snow-capped peaks pink, I sat in my high-floor office, looking at that view and feeling a freedom I had never known. Work was busier than ever. We had just signed memorandums of understanding with 2 international hotel chains, one in Europe and one in Asia. Partners said they chose Aurora not only for the numbers in our financial reports, but because of how I demonstrated resolve during a family crisis. The story spread through the business world faster than any marketing campaign. In one meeting, an older executive smiled and shook my hand firmly. Mrs. Williams, people can build hotels anywhere, but trust and steadfastness can't be bought. We chose you because you know where true value lies. I smiled and replied, hotels are where people come to rest. And for me, ethics in business are the safe home for every partnership. One late afternoon while I was reviewing a new project file, my assistant brought in an envelope. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Daniel. In the letter he wrote, "Athena, Emily and I have thought a lot after everything that happened. We decided to establish an annual scholarship fund for hospitality management students, inspired by you. We want the next generation to understand that success comes with responsibility, and gratitude must be shown through action. Thank you for giving us a profound lesson, not only about family but about how to be human." I set the letter on the desk quietly. Outside, the sun was slipping behind the Rocky Mountains, the day's last light filtering through the windows and filling the room. I realized that for the first time I stopped living as the family bank, no longer trying to prove my worth through recognition from those who were never willing to see it. I was living for myself, for the dream, for the empire I built, and for peace within. A hot cup of coffee sent up a gentle aroma on the table. Soft jazz played from the office speakers. I leaned back, my eyes on the distance where the snowy peaks still stood tall despite all change. And I knew that from here my journey was truly beginning. You've just heard my story. A journey from being treated like a walking bank, to standing strong and living in alignment with my true worth. But I believe each person will see something different in it. Some will see a lesson about boundaries, some will see the strength of steadfast silence, and others will think more about the value of fairness within a family. What about you? If you were in my place, pushed out of the very wedding you quietly shouldered, would you choose to forgive, to counterattack, or to walk away from the start? Share your thoughts in the comments below because I truly want to hear from those listening to this story. And if stories about family, betrayal, and the journey back to oneself speak to your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. There are many more stories about family life, unexpected turns, and how we keep moving forward, told here for you.